Welcome to Reset with Amber Lion. Today we have a very special podcast because we are live in the Amazon rainforest at an amazing ayahuasca healing center, the Spirit Quest Sanctuary, with owner and Maestro Howard Lawler, also known as Don Howard. And I have had the pleasure of sitting in 4 ayahuasca ceremonies with Don Howard, who is a true master at what he does. It's been like watching a famous artist painting on a canvas, watching him work these ceremonies. And not only does he respect the tradition of ayahuasca and the sacred medicine, but also those coming in for healing. And I've witnessed some incredible transformations here in this room in the Maloka, not only with others in our group, but also personally. I've had a lot of healing and insights on this trip, thanks to the work of Don Howard and Don Robert. And I can't thank you enough. I'm sure you've already noticed my transformation since coming here. One of the biggest things I've noticed is my mind was racing. I tend to get in this chatter race and not be in the present moment. And the medicine has really calmed that down for me, shown me ways to not only calm my mind, but also, for the first time really in my life, show love for myself. And that's just been so profound to know that in 1 week that I could have such a dramatic transformation. So I'll get more into my personal story of healing with Don Howard, but first I'd like to just download your knowledge for our listeners. So many of them are just coming into the world of ayahuasca, just learning about it for the first time, and they're like sponges. They want to absorb everything they can about this incredible sacred medicine. And something I'd like to get from you is what do you think ayahuasca is? What is this sacred brew?
Well, ayahuasca is perhaps the quintessential holistic medicine in that it works dramatically, sometimes subtly, other times dramatically, in healing specific needs of each person in the realm of the body, mind, and spirit. So it works in all these areas, sometimes simultaneously in 2 or more, and sometimes just in one focal area according to the need of the person.
And so what do you think that in all your years of healing, it's been 22 years now, what do you think ayahuasca is most effective at treating when it comes to Westerners? Why are so many Westerners seeking ayahuasca at this point in history?
Well, some people come for physical healing, others come for emotional or psychological healing, and others come for spiritual healing. Probably the most widespread need that most people seem to have is to quench their spiritual thirst, to find something meaningful in their lives that fills that void or that need for something more substantive than the material rewards of life. In terms of pathology, probably the most common condition people bring to ayahuasca in particular is depression, or some degree of depression. And ayahuasca is without a doubt the most effective treatment for depression known to man, in terms of affecting, in the great majority of cases, a complete cure, or at least setting people on the road to full healing, enabling them to be independent of chemical support or chemical maintenance, such as with antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications. And then the other area that ayahuasca has very observable effectiveness is in neurophysiological disorders like Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, conditions of that nature.
Why do you think ayahuasca is so effective at treating depression? I know, according to some statistics, about 10% of women in their 40s and 50s are on some type of depression medication, potentially 10% of all U.S. adults. So this is, we're nearing a phase of this being an epidemic, especially in the United States. Why is it that ayahuasca is so effective in helping people heal from depression?
Well, ayahuasca works actually in 2 ways. One is physiological, in effectively normalizing the serotonin mechanism in the brain, in the production of serotonin, producing an equilibrium that generally immediately or very quickly alleviates the symptoms, the manifestations of it. but it also produces a normalization of that function so that it simply works thereafter in a more normal fashion. Not too much, not too little, but just to produce the proper balance. At the same time, ayahuasca enables a deep personal psychoanalytical process that enables people to go into their inner consciousness, the subconscious or unconscious mind, to identify and connect and find catharsis and closure with the factors that have caused them to become depressed in the first place. So it really addresses both cause and effect, and works both in the psychological arena as well as in the physiological realm.
So it's actually getting in the brain and kind of changing the brain chemistry and the serotonergic system?
Changing the brain chemistry, but normalizing the brain chemistry, not altering it artificially as is the function with pharmaceutical antidepressants, for example. But the indications are that it actually heals that biochemical process, which alleviates the feelings, and the resolutions afforded by the psychoanalytical process enables people to experience a clean start and a fresh perspective in their lives.
It's interesting you say that, because when I first had my first drink of ayahuasca, I felt it crawling through my brain, and it almost felt like a fizzing in my brain, and the medicine was telling me, I just heard this voice telling me, I'm just in here cleaning house, restructuring, fixing things. Your brain chemistry's a little out of whack, because I was suffering from symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, just very anxious, and I felt it going in, and it felt like that's what it was doing, and so you're saying that is what it does. It's pretty fascinating.
That's my perception of it, both personally and subjectively, and what I've seen with literally thousands of people who've come to work with us here at the sanctuary, seeking healing for those very, very problems and issues.
And of those thousands of people who've come through here with depression and left healed, can you think of a particular story that stands out in your mind of an individual, and how they came? Can you describe how they came here at your sanctuary, how they started, what their mental state was like, what they discovered during their experience, and how they left here?
Well, the scenario is pretty consistent with everybody who comes. Obviously, their own issues and their own life history is unique, but the patterns are very much the same. People have found themselves at an impasse in life. They are no longer able to experience joy and happiness beyond the superficial level. And often they've allowed themselves to sink into a state of despair and hopelessness, and are pretty much ready to give up, or they've resorted to the pharmaceutical alternatives, which is little more than a Band-Aid for the condition. It alleviates some of the symptoms, but it doesn't restore one to a normal, positive, dynamic state of holistic health. And so actually the first step in this process is to help people get off the medications that they are taking ostensibly to relieve their condition, but which in many cases actually makes it worse.
So can doesn't ayahuasca not like prescription medications?
No,
it interacts poorly with them?
They're dramatically contraindicated. So it's very dangerous, in fact, for one to take ayahuasca with even residual traces of pharmaceutical antidepressants in their system. So the first step to work safely with ayahuasca is to clear the medication. That usually takes 4 to 6 weeks, depending on how long the person's taken the med and what they're taking. And then there's a gradual reduction in dosage until they're clear of it, and then they need to be clear for 2 or 3 weeks, ideally, before they begin to work with ayahuasca. That assures at least that there will be no serious side effects or contraindications resulting from a crossing over of those effects.
And so when the person comes in, they clear themselves of these prescription medications, and they're ready to try the ayahuasca. They come to your center, and can you describe typically what happens during that process and how they leave here feeling?
Well, the first thing is a training, an orientation in the techniques one needs to apply in working successfully with ayahuasca. There's much more to ayahuasca than what's in the cup, and it's a dynamic interaction with one's state of being at the time you take it, and also dramatically influenced by the preparation one makes beforehand. And key to that preparation is the conscious formation of an intention to come into that relationship. The other is beginning to focus on stilling the mind and letting go of all the monkey chatter that most people engage in most of the time, the active mind, as it were, the critical analytical mind, and finding a space of stillness in that and moving the center of one's consciousness into the heart space, which is where all the healing really emanates from there and really occurs in that aspect of our consciousness. So the mind is something of an obstacle, really, when preparing to work with ayahuasca. It's not a mind thing, in spite of the common Western take on it, on this and similar processes, is that it's something we do in our minds, but actually that's an obstacle that we have to try to get beyond in order to get to the real core of our healing.
And so when the individual drinks that first cup of ayahuasca, can you describe that process? What is happening? It's hard to put into words because you enter this dreamlike state. It's very mystical. And I feel like, as you've mentioned, I feel like it's doing a disservice to it to try to describe it in words and in science when it is so mystical and beautiful. But can you explain to someone who has never tried ayahuasca, what happens to that person after drinking that first cup for that next 4 hours?
Well, the first phase of most people's relationship with ayahuasca involves a deep process of purification or cleansing. And actually, for most people, in their first encounter with ayahuasca, it's not particularly pleasant and blissful and even positive. Sometimes a lot of negative things come up. And that's because people have a lot of negative things in them. So ayahuasca is like a very, very insightful psychotherapist that knows the patient better than the patient knows themselves. So a lot of times things come up that people realize is in there but have not been able to confront or really bring to the forefront. They've relatively successfully suppressed it through much of their lives, but it's still wielding a negative influence in their lives. And so this is usually the first thing that happens, is a purification and a bringing forward of that which has been suppressed in the subconscious. And the nature of the experience varies tremendously from person to person. There's no way to predict it. There's no way that is to say, there's no way to predict the kind of experience that anyone's going to have in any given encounter. So the technology really is to prepare the mindset, the heart set, with guidance before the ceremony, prepare a setting that's safe, supportive, and conducive to people letting their defenses down and finding themselves in a position to really surrender to the medicine rather than resist it, rather than to try to make it what they want it to be. In this day and time, the attitudes that people bring to ayahuasca are more diverse now than ever before. And so it's very important that people have some idea of what they want to acquire from it, a result-oriented intention, rather than simply a curiosity to see what it's like or to pursue it merely for the experience. The experience is a means to a greater end and really isn't an end in itself. So people who approach it in the right way with the right intention and are willing to do the work, we never say we come to play with ayahuasca. It's always work with the medicine.
I can attest to that. Yes.
And that's
easy.
because it's not easy. It's a challenging undertaking. And it's a challenge that that the majority of people have the capability to meet and to undertake successfully. But there's a certain there's a small percentage of people who are just not wired right for ayahuasca, and for whom it's not only not a safe and necessarily productive medicine to use, but it can be also dangerous.
That's what I always try to say. This is not the be-all and end-all. It's not this miracle cure. It doesn't work. I've had people write me emails and say that they've come down and tried ayahuasca and they felt the experience was horrific. And then they got on a plane the next day, and left. So I think it's really, I agree with you. I think it's really, if you feel that calling inside your body and really feel called to the medicine and respect it, then you may be one to receive healing. But it doesn't work for everybody.
It doesn't work for everybody, and I think the personal relationship is really based on that calling.
Mm-hmm.
Calling is a mysterious and mystical thing, and it transcends all of the common barriers that people, by which people separate themselves from others. Nationality, ethnicity, race, sexual preference, age. All of these are really irrelevant. The important thing is the nature of the intention of the individual, what they bring to the medicine, because it's very interactive. It's primarily interactive in the internal arena. The externalization of it begins to show up after the intensive work is over, and you go into the integration, which is an open-ended process that usually lasts months or longer. One could say that one continues to integrate ayahuasca for the rest of your life, because it has a way of continually presenting itself in everyday situations with insights and perceptions that often in the ordinary realm of consciousness one would not notice or not pay much attention to. So there are lessons all around us, and ayahuasca continues to reveal those things for a long time after the intensive work is over.
So we're talking about the work. I mean, you've described that ayahuasca is not easy. Like, this is not coming down to try a drug or get high.
Right.
It is a medicine, and it's very difficult when you're on it, but then you reap rewards for years or maybe a lifetime later. And I think it's beautiful. That's the way a medicine should work. It shouldn't be easy when you're on it. It should be difficult. So you're processing all of this trauma and negative energy. And then, so later, you're feeling better. And I know some people refer to the throwing up and the diarrhea as getting well, because you're getting rid of those toxins. When people drink ayahuasca, what is it that they're seeing? What are they seeing and experiencing?
Well, everybody that drinks ayahuasca doesn't necessarily see anything in terms of visually. Seeing can be realized in feeling, as opposed to a visual interaction. Probably the thing that's most overstated and overemphasized about ayahuasca are the visions, even though that's the most dramatic aspect of it, and the thing that people often want to experience the most is they want to have a vision. They want to know what a vision is. And ayahuasca actually doesn't induce visions. It reveals through an opening of the heart and a connection with deeper consciousness. And for a high percentage of people, that manifests in the form of some visual experience, visual journey, but it's not inevitable. Some people have a higher propensity for that than others. And it's not an essential component to the effectiveness, to the healing properties of ayahuasca. People who have strong vision sometimes become infatuated with that aspect of it and sometimes realize less life benefits than people who have less visionary experiences but are really receiving the medicine in a gracious way without putting any demands or expectations on it. So that comes back to what people bring to it, the intention for the work, their ability to let go of expectations based on what they may have heard about it. Ayahuasca is rarely in the experience of it what people expect. And no matter what the expectation is, it generally presents itself in ways that are unexpected. So expectation can sometimes interfere with that process because it leads to demands or a lack of satisfaction because it wasn't what was expected. It didn't happen in the way they've heard it's happened with other people. Probably the best way to come to one's personal work with ayahuasca is with as little input as possible about the experiences of other people, so that you can have your own experience unimpeded by that expectation.
And how is ayahuasca beneficial at helping people pull up repressed memories from childhood? I know so many people are carrying around childhood trauma that's been in the driver's seat their entire lives, and they just don't realize that this is what's at the core of a lot of their problems. And I know that ayahuasca, even for me personally, has been very effective in helping me reprocess my childhood. How have you seen that play out here in the Maloka?
It's an amazing tool for regressionary therapy, and when the time is right, it's not something that one can come and drink and then just necessarily commandeer the trajectory to take you there. Ayahuasca has an uncanny ability to know when the time is right and when the person is ready to undertake that regressionary process, to go back to where the beginning of their personal issue began, often in some childhood trauma scenario. And usually the experience is one of reliving that experience, but from a somewhat detached third-person perspective, almost as an observer, observing yourself in that life situation. And often it's something that you've virtually forgotten the details of in your conscious mind, but everything's recorded. Everything is in our subconscious or inner conscious.
I think that's the problem. So people think, oh, well, he won't remember it. It just happened when he was a child. I spoke with one individual who was molested as a child, and his parents knew it and just thought he'd forget it. And then he was on, he had taken an LSD experience, and it came up, and he remembered everything that had happened to him at age 25. Mm-hmm. And his parents, he went and questioned his parents about it afterwards, and they said, oh, well, we thought you had forgotten. Oh, we were hoping you'd just forget. But you're saying that no matter what, you remember everything that happened to you in your life, and you need to process that?
No one ever forgets anything. You may not have a clear recall in your conscious mind, but everything that's happened to us from birth and even before birth is a part of our, I guess you could say, a part of our primal memory. And so actually a core of psychotherapy is to use various types of methods and techniques to help people recover those connections. And healing always occurs at the source or where the cause of the condition began. So the superficial approaches may bring temporary relief, but they usually don't get to the real core of the issue, and they usually don't affect healing. So this is an accelerated or potentially accelerated form of very deep psychotherapy that can happen in a period as short as 8 or 10 days for some people. In some cases, a cycle of work followed by a period of integration, then a return for another cycle at some later time, that might be several months later, may be necessary to complete that cathartic process and enable one to find closure to whatever that issue was. A big part of which is finding an absolution of personal guilt and a deep sense of forgiveness, particularly if that trauma was acted upon a person by another person. So it's finding a deeper understanding not only of what happened to you, but why it happened, and often one sees the perpetrator of that to have been a victim themselves of the same thing. And so in many cases, those are just behaviors that are passed from generation to generation until someone has the opportunity to break the cycle. So ayahuasca has a profound capacity for finding a way to get to the actual core of the problem and finding closure, bringing a true healing. When that happens, people rarely revisit. They may have a memory of what happened, but it's no longer affecting their lives in a negative way.
Isn't that amazing that simply remembering something and reprocessing it can transform your entire life? Just that simple, sometimes 1 minute long act, you know? But, and that for me, it really helped me process my parents' divorce as a child. I didn't realize I had internalized so much of that. Like you're saying, you don't ever forget it. And so I'd go back and I'd relive, I'd see myself at age 4 and I'd relive their fighting and my dad leaving the house and all these memories I didn't even know I had. And just simply doing that and letting that go, I just feel like, you know, bricks have been taken off my shoulders and I just feel a calming sense of peace. Yeah. And that's why I am so in love with this medicine, because I see the potential for so many people out there who are just suffering with all of this trauma that we just never process in the West. I'm always wondering what's going on in your mind during an ayahuasca ceremony, because sometimes I see you with your eyes closed, you're nodding your head, you're smiling, and I'm just fascinated with what's going on in the mind of an ayahuasca healer as all of us are drinking the medicine.
Well, to be honest, there's not a whole lot going on in our minds because the connection is deeper than the mind. So the perception is the energy. The first perception is feeling and sensing the energetic state of each person present in terms of how much they're in their head, how much they're how relaxed, how trusting they are, how much fear they're feeling, either subliminally or overtly, and determining everybody's readiness for what's to unfold. And then it's a matter of preparing each person with a protection. That's a spiritual protection that not only provides an energetic shield against external negative influences, but it also provides a deeper sense of security and support, personal security and support, which has a calming effect. It's very important to try to come to ayahuasca in as calm a state as you can, with as little anxiety or fear, even though everybody who comes to it for the first time usually brings some of that. But as one gains experience, you realize that there's nothing to fear but fear itself, and so long as you're in a safe space, in a process conducted by someone who has experience, knowledge, skill, compassion, love in their heart for themselves and others, and a high degree of integrity, then the typical scenario or the progression of the work is positive, even though it may be challenging or difficult. Even in a challenging and difficult scenario, one may experience the entire gamut of human emotion and feeling and perception of positive influences as well as negative influences. Ayahuasca inevitably reveals to everyone, sooner or later, some aspects about their dark side or the negativity that they hold and harbor within them, and that's a way of knowing what that is and finding ways to gain mastery of that. You know, no one ever completely removes it from their being, but it need not be dominant in anyone's life either. So it's about restoring balance in that sense. It's the yin-yang sense of balance of energy.
So you can see people's energy when the lights go off and we're all sitting in the maloka.
The visualization of that is probably not the most important aspect of it. It's sensing and feeling, and it's not necessarily something one sees every time. One of the reasons traditional ayahuasca work is an ayahuasca ceremony and traditional shamanic practice is almost always done at night in the dark, so that the luminous bodies and the energy fields can be more clearly seen and diagnosed in terms of the state of health or the state of stability that each person has. So in a very real sense, everybody glows in the dark in an ayahuasca ceremony, and some people in attendance can also see that, but everybody doesn't necessarily isn't attuned to perceive that.
And say you see that someone has an energetic problem. How do you, as a healer, how do you fix it?
Well, by working the medicine. You know, for the most part, the medicine is at work in the ceremony, and there's not necessarily a proactive response required in most cases. In most cases, it's simply providing the guidance and protection, and the Icaros serve as the grounding mechanism, if you will, the guide through the auditory channel. And if a person begins to show signs of agitation or undue stress, then we have ways of reducing the intensity of the medicine in the moment using the shakapa and Icaros and tobacco. Tobacco has a calming property. It has a protective energy, and tobacco is the companion plant that is most widely associated with shamanic practices of virtually all kinds in the New World, ayahuasca being one of those.
How much do spirits, I know this is very mystical, and it's definitely opened my eyes to the real world. I think we want to pretend in the Western world that magic and spirits don't exist, and that's all hocus pocus. But for me, what's been really exciting and brought me a lot of hope and excitement in life is knowing that that's not the real world, that box of everything being black and white. But this is the real world, a world of spirits and magic and mysticism. How much do spirits play a role in an ayahuasca ceremony?
Work with ayahuasca involves a technology of communication with unseen elements within a parallel universe. It's perhaps one way to envision it. In ayahuasca work, there's much more emphasis on propitiating and communicating with spirits, meaning the spirits of plants, spirits of animals, spirits at a more organic level, somewhat more organic level. The Icaros themselves are learned through a process of dieta, which is done in isolation, which enables one to still the mind sufficiently and heighten one's energetic sensitivity to a degree which enables them to actually open a channel of communication with the consciousness of plants, with the consciousness of other animals, with the consciousness of the elements, and perhaps most directly the earth itself, but to communicate with the spirit of water, to realize the water, earth, air, fire, all are conscious entities with the ability to teach us as well as bring medicine to us.
And so the Icaros is calling in plant spirits and healers to heal the people in the room?
To participate in the healing ceremony. The Icaros are something like a key to a portal that opens to enable energy to move through from a supernatural to a natural realm, or from the metaphysical realm into the physical realm. And that is based mainly on a personal relationship that the curandero has with specific healing spirits. So this is pretty central to the concept and practice of traditional ayahuasca shamanism.
So when I've felt that before, when I've been on working with ayahuasca, I've felt that there have been like spirits on me, like little doctors or beings just working on my body. Particularly this session, I felt it at one point on my head. Like I felt like there was just like little doctors working on my head, and I could feel this pressure. So that's true. I'm not just imagining this. There's actually plant spirits going around the room to each individual, just like little doctors working on them.
Yeah, and it's interesting you use the word little doctors because here in the Amazon they're called doctorcitos,
Okay.
and that literally means the little doctor, it's a reflection of a relationship of endearment, or there's a certain affection one has with the doctorcitos that are called into the ceremony to participate in the healing process. Usually in a ceremony involving a group of people, the same doctorcitos are not necessarily helpful for everyone present. So usually different doctorcitos are invited into the ceremony, usually by calling their names in the opening Icaro. And usually by the end of the first hour in the ceremony, the room has filled up with more presence than it started with. And people typically have a sense of other entities or other beings present beyond the human attendants. Sometimes standing nearby, sometimes actually working on them as you've described. And often that is brought into even greater focus through the specific work of the curandero with the individual. Some of that is affected through the group work, and some of it comes in through more focal work with individuals, particularly people with special issues or problems. In most ceremonies, the majority of people receive the healing in their place without a great deal of special attention, whereas other people with special conditions or needs may be brought to the healing mat, for example, and given special procedures that are appropriate for their needs.
This is just, it's so exciting for me because I grew up being told, as so many people have, that this doesn't exist, that all this magic and spirits, it's just not, it's made up. And something I've seen, and coming in through the scope of an investigative reporter who was skeptical of everything, I've really seen magic happen with the ayahuasca, and I felt like those doctorcitos were working on my body and healing me. What would you say to someone who says this is all in your mind, you guys are just making this up, this doesn't really exist?
Well, that perception would be based on what people are not aware of, not based on what they are. So it's I guess it's a perceptual blockage that people have, and people who are very strongly ensconced in their left brain, rational analytical mind are naturally skeptical of anything that can't be seen or proven by some scientific method or if no other basis, just based on their own perception. But a lot of people have come into this work with that skepticism and have changed their mind after a few personal encounters with it. You know, it at least has opened their mind and hearts to greater possibilities than they previously thought to be the case. But it's really a matter of what one is seeking from the medicine. Perception is a great part of everyone's reality. So it's kind of breaking down those barriers of material perception so that people can be aware of things that are less tangible, but just as real is what they normally think of as consensus reality.
And why is it, do you think, that these plant spirits want to heal humans? Why do all these doctorcitos come to the ceremony to help us?
Because we ask them, because we invite them. You know, it would be presumptive to think that they otherwise have any special agenda to do that. You know, they're in service to people if they receive the call and are petitioned in the right way. But I think I would not assume that they are simply waiting at the door, waiting to come in because they want to help us. They're at our beck and call if we petition them in the right way.
You were saying earlier, some people come in with not just ayahuasca isn't just used to treat anxiety and depression. Some people come in with back problems, with Parkinson's. You were saying, and you've seen it heal them as well.
Yeah, yeah, quite dramatically and rather quickly. You know, and you know, healing as a general process, and especially with these plants, is rarely instantaneous. It's not just one epiphanic moment where suddenly the healing is done and people are dramatically transformed in a moment. More typically, it precipitates a process. And it's an accelerated process, but it often takes days, sometimes weeks, sometimes even longer to run its course, be fully realized by the person. But ayahuasca has a remarkable range of efficacy in treating a wide range of conditions and needs. But that said, it would be incorrect and somewhat misleading to claim that ayahuasca cures everything. It doesn't. And that is often said by people who know a little bit about it, but not a whole lot. If they had really deep knowledge, they'd know that, like every medicine, it has its scope of efficacy, but it also has its limitations. So there are conditions and there are people who simply aren't ready to receive it to its fullest benefit, who get less benefit from it. It doesn't work equally with everyone, and that's in large part due to the interactivity of it. Some people want to experience ayahuasca, but they're not really ready to surrender to it. And once they come into it and the connection begins to form, then they want to either fight it or run from it. And that kind of defeats the purpose of it. It requires, in its best moments, a high degree of trust, a significant amount of courage and will and strength. And those are things that one cannot find sufficiently in their minds to often to hang in there and really get the fullest benefit from it. You have to be able to find the grace and the strength to surrender to it. And in this context, surrender is not a show of weakness, it's actually a show of strength and trust. But that's a significant jump for a lot of people living in the modern world who are exposed to all sorts of betrayals, disappointments. Things are not as they seem, so it's understandable that people bring a certain amount of skepticism and sometimes at least a latent instinct for self-defense when one's sense of control of oneself or the circumstance they're in begins to slip away, and they realize that they're not in charge anymore in that moment. That is actually a very empowering process. And what people find after having submitted themselves to this process is that when they come back into their previously ordinary life space, they have a much greater sense of command of their own faculties and their own the mastery of their own space. It's a very empowering kind of a thing. And as long as one stays really focused in the heart consciousness and doesn't go where the ego resides in their minds, there's always a sense of humility and gratitude attached to that. You know, you realize that you're stronger, you have a greater sense of your own human potential and your capacity to not just to deal with your own life issues, but to help other people. Shamanism is in its pure essence a path of service. But in order to be of service, one must become fit for service. So the proper first focus and emphasis in anyone's relationship with ayahuasca is to focus on your own needs and your own healing, defined as accurately and correctly as you can through your own formation of intention, and then being open to new things being presented to you by the medicine, coming from a deeper subconscious or level that sometimes our conscious mind is not aware of. So those things come to us, and we have a greater realization of where we're coming from, where we are, what our true condition is, what the real cause of our condition is, so that we can get in there and and resolve it at its core.
Because sometimes you look at these physical conditions, people can't explain why I'm having back pain. They don't
No.
understand, but it's because they're carrying this trauma and it's manifesting itself in the physical as well.
Exactly. But the physical pain is not the cause; it's a symptom. And so, by all shamanic healing focuses on the cause of the condition, much more than symptoms. Whereas Western medicine tends to focus more on alleviating symptoms, and in some cases deals with the cause, but in particularly in the case of psychosomatic illness and psychological conditions like depression, which has many roots sometimes. Contemporary Western medicine actually has no real answers to that other than to mask the symptoms.
Or just keep giving you surgery. I mean, if you have a back problem caused by storing childhood trauma, you get surgery on your back, it's going to then manifest itself in your shoulder or in other health issues. And so I think that's what part of the tragedy is of Western medicine, is that, like you're saying, it just never really gets to the core root of the problem.
Yeah.
Do you think that ayahuasca, we're seeing it now spread all over the world. Do you think ayahuasca wants to be spread? Do you think ayahuasca is trying to heal humanity? I mean, what do you think's going on here with this? I'm sure you've noticed an increase in just not only the amount of media coverage about ayahuasca, but the amount of people partaking in ceremonies. Why do you think it's spreading around the world?
Well, first of all, I think the idea that ayahuasca wants to do this is a projection of what people want. Mm-hmm. So it's not what ayahuasca wants, it's what humanity needs. And so the emergence of this is based on a relatively recent discovery of this by the Western world. And, there's a certain subjectivity to how people perceive ayahuasca based on their own attitude, what they're looking for, what they think it is, based on how it's presented by the media and through whatever channels they become aware of it. But I think it offers the kinds of answers that a lot of people are looking for if they are wired right for it. But not everybody is. It would be a mistake to think that ayahuasca is a panacea that's good for everybody and that everybody should take ayahuasca. That would be a naive perception of it, and it would reflect a more subjective relationship. It's easy to take that position if your relationship with it has been positive and gratifying and good things have come from it. But it's not all in the cup. And how ayahuasca is undertaken, the setting, the set, how it's guided, how it's administered, has as much to do with the outcome as simply drinking it. Taken under the wrong circumstances, ayahuasca can do harm. Ayahuasca can be dangerous. So taking it under any circumstance is not the best approach, and that has never been the approach in traditional practice. It's always been done ceremonially in a ritual fashion in a controlled setting and conducted ostensibly by people with great depth of personal experience with it, and then training in how to administer it to others, because different people are going to take it in different ways. Some people will be very traumatized by it. That trauma can be ameliorated by proper management of their energy and state during the intensive phase. And virtually inevitably, people land, as they come out of the intensive, in a stable state. Sometimes takes maybe a day, sometimes maybe a couple of days to completely ground and settle in that. But everybody, for the most part, comes out of it better than they went in.
So how can someone choose a reliable healer? What are the signs of someone who's doing it right? Because obviously down here, I was so amazed with your work and your respect for the tradition and the sacred, and it's been such a relief for me because along the path, I didn't always have the most responsible shamans. And I always wish I'd had someone give me like not necessarily a checklist, but just some ideas of ways to know that you're working with a good healer. Is there any advice you can give to people for choosing their shaman?
It goes back to those criteria I mentioned earlier, and that is the most important qualification is integrity. Actual personal experience with the medicine and the kind of training that one has had determines the qualifications in terms of their technical ability to administer it safely and well, and to predictably get the best results from it. But knowing the person that you're going to work with is important, and that might be through your own direct personal experience with them, direct contact, or through a trusted reference. But in general, it's not a good idea to meet someone in the afternoon and then that night go into an ayahuasca ceremony with them, because you're going, in many cases, one's going to be completely stripped down of their normal defensive mechanisms, and it can create a rather profound sense of insecurity sometimes if you're not pretty comfortable with the setting and with the people you're engaging it with. But to be honest, the majority of people right now in the world who are presuming to administer ayahuasca and conduct ceremonies are totally unqualified to do so. They may have good intentions, but they simply don't have the knowledge, the skill, the experience. Experience with ayahuasca is measured in years, even decades, not 24 ceremonies or 50 or 100 even. People are still actually doing their personal work at that level, and they're not yet really qualified to give ayahuasca to others, because there are so many permutations of outcome in knowing how to respond, how to deal with those scenarios. So again, that's somewhat of a Western notion that's based on the idea, I think, to be honest, that because the modern Western mind is better educated, that somehow we have a higher aptitude for this and we can learn it quicker than people have learned it through the ages, over centuries or even millennia. The typical apprenticeship and training to work with ayahuasca in traditional practice is 8 to 10 years. And that's not 3 or 4 times a year. Mm-hmm. That's 8 to 10 years doing it at least monthly, usually several times monthly, and working in ceremony with someone who already knows what they're doing and how to do it, and simply learning through repetitive exposure to technique, and then learning from situations and scenarios that come up in the course of the practice. So it's best learned through long-term assistance to someone who has already attained a certain level of mastery of it. In many cases, in the current scenario, it's kind of like the blind leading the blind in certain ways. People are trying to conduct ceremony and trying to be something that they aspire to be, but they aren't yet. And the intentions are good. I rarely question people's intentions in this regard, but I can quickly question their qualifications, which is evident based on how they hold the space, how they set it up, how they conduct it, and how they deal with the outcome, and helping people integrate, setting people on the right course for integration, and doing that in a way that doesn't intervene too much in that process, because it's very personal. Mm-hmm. It's not something that a third person can very effectively influence after a while.
So if most of these shamans, they don't know what they're doing, they're not trained, how do people get past that? I mean, you just shouldn't trust them and partake in these ceremonies?
I would say that it has been 10 to 20 years ago it was a far less complex landscape than it is now because of this very factor. Mm-hmm. And I would say that it's a scenario now of seeker beware, seeker be discriminating. Look for some level of expertise and qualification other than someone who can simply serve you ayahuasca, for example. In our practice, one good way to know actually is does the practitioner approach it as a process, or do they approach it as a singular experience? To us, the administration of ayahuasca to a person just one time in a single ceremony is tantamount to malpractice. That's simply because everything doesn't happen in one ceremony. It's the beginning of a process, and it requires more than one exposure in order for that process to run its course. And usually in a cycle of work, people reach a point of temporal closure where they've had enough, and now it's time to assimilate, integrate, digest what you've been given. And that's something that should ideally happen over several weeks, if not 2 or 3 months at least, before one begins to think about doing it again.
So you're saying it's best for people to maybe say they're in need of healing to come down to the Amazon for a 10-day, 4-ceremony session like you do, versus just doing a one-off ayahuasca session and one-off in someone's backyard and
Precisely.
in the US.
That may be entertaining, and people may have a sense of getting something out of it, but they in most cases they don't have a real sense of the actual full potential of that connection. So they get a little bit of benefit, whereas in a proper cycle of work, they might get a major life-changing benefit that really lasts. The minimum sequence in a cycle that one should try to do is 3 ceremonies over a period of 7 to 10 days. A 4th ceremony is beneficial, sometimes is providing an opportunity for make-up work in the process. Not every ayahuasca ceremony is equally intense, nor is every ceremony equally gratifying in the short term. And often after people have had time to reflect on it and really integrate a bit, looking back, they often see that much more happened in a given ceremony than they thought at the time, and they see how it all lines up and connects together. But the other criterion really about in the administration of ayahuasca is that here no genuine practitioner of ayahuasca shamanism would ever even think of administering ayahuasca that they themselves didn't make. So when people are acquiring ayahuasca from some other source and then serving it in ceremony, one has to question how really connected are they and how much do they really know about this medicine if they have to buy it from somebody else in order to conduct their ceremony. And one of the reasons for that is the energetic composition of ayahuasca is more than just the plants that are blended together to make it. There's a very strong peripheral energetic aspect to it. One of the things that I was first taught by my original Maestro over 20 years ago when I first started working with ayahuasca was that ayahuasca is like a magnet. And that was a bit abstract to me at the time. And then I began to, but that stuck in my mind, I began to notice how ayahuasca tends to draw energy around it, incorporate it into its own essence. So ideally, ayahuasca is made in a natural setting surrounded by nature where the energy of nature is drawn into it in its making. As you know, here we make the ayahuasca in we have an ayahuasca kitchen out in the forest, and we would never make ayahuasca in a kitchen or in a city or in an urban environment because of the mixed energy present there that can be drawn into the medicine. And that's true for the human intentions around it as well. The maker should have a very keen focus and intention for the purpose of healing, if in fact the medicine is being made for that. Mm-hmm. But ayahuasca can have different qualities, and all ayahuasca does not have strong healing properties because that's not the energy that's been put in it.
It's interesting you say that because I felt that at different ceremonies I've attended, I've had completely different experiences, some being very mild, some being extremely healing.
Yeah.
And so ayahuasca, it's spreading whether anyone can control it or not. I think my biggest fear is the press misrepresenting it and making it seem like more of a fad. The New York Times put ayahuasca in the fashion and style section instead of the actual health section, which I thought was a shame considering the incredible amount of journalists and resources they had. Also, I find that I also worry a little bit about the tourism angle and whether all of the tourism's accurately being reported on and people are being told all of the aspects of it. Something that you don't like is the word ayahuasca tourism.
Correct.
And why is that? I think because I think it is being portrayed as a tourist type. Let's go, just like you would go and visit or go scuba diving or go on vacation. This is kind of being looked at as just a recreational activity.
Precisely, which is precisely why I think the association of those words is somewhat contradictory to what it is, and it presents a denigrating image of ayahuasca to people who are just learning about it and getting their first, how first impressions are lasting impressions. And so my concern now is the portrayal of ayahuasca, not just in how it's done, but the expanding venues in which it's done, many of which are, and I in no way am I saying none of these are legitimate, valid, and beneficial, but one has to be discriminating in deciding what's right for them, and it's not necessarily what's most convenient. But the concept of ayahuasca tourism has shifted the landscape dramatically in the last 5 to 8 years here in the Amazon, and it has begun to erode the general attitude and respect for it, even in the local culture. It's now increasingly seen as a touristic commodity, and in the minds of many people, less and less as a traditional healing practice. And more and more people are drawn to it for the experience of it rather than for the results of it. So I think the media now has the opportunity to self-correct in how it's portrayed. I think that's the most important thing is how it's portrayed, and basically avoiding the impression that it is simply the latest drug fad. In fact, it's
drug tourism.
It's offensive to me and to the medicine to even call it a drug. That's a Western concept that usually has a somewhat hedonistic or at least recreational context in popular culture. There also is a tendency now for other substances that are quite different in many ways from ayahuasca or wachuma, the traditional plant medicines, to just refer to everything now as medicine, even when it's not. There are drugs and there are medicine. All drugs aren't medicine. Many drugs are medicine also, but all drugs aren't medicine. So when that term begins to be applied as a kind of as a way of legitimizing it, then that begins to blur the distinction between legitimate medicines that are primarily applied for purposes of healing and other substances that are more usually applied because they make you feel good. Ayahuasca is contrary to that. One could say that ayahuasca is something of an anti-drug. It's not something that anyone should pursue or embrace for the purposes of immediate feel-good gratification. Usually it goes the other way in the beginning, and then you feel good after it's over. And then you feel good for a long time in your everyday life because things have been realigned. Your balance has been restored in your life. A lot of things that were out of kilter or in need of healing or fixing have been repaired. And so most people come out of it with a renewed vigor for life, a much more positive outlook, It's one of the typical outcomes with people who've suffered depression, sometimes for years. Is there's an attitudinal shift that's reflected in the way they look, the way they act, the way they engage life, and rarely is there a slippage in that. People usually don't backslide very much once they get to that point. And it's because the causative factors have been addressed. Healing has occurred at the source of the problem. That's the beauty of it. But this is determined as much by how it's done and where and with whom as simply by taking the medicine.
In addition to healing, ayahuasca has really shown me why I'm here. Potential insights about the creation of mankind and insights about the universe. And that's just been really beautiful, because a lot of those are opposite of what we've been told by religion and in Western culture. And so it's bringing back the magic and excitement into my life. And I'm sure in your 22 years of working with ayahuasca, you've had some of these downloads and insights. And we're running out of time, but before we go, is there anything in particular that stands out in your mind, some type of knowledge download you've been given by the medicine that you'd like to leave people with that may give them a little more hope or excitement to be alive?
I think probably the greatest gift of ayahuasca is a realization of our own personal human potential and the potential of humanity to rise above that which has held us back for so long, to find answers and solutions to the inequities and the pain and suffering that exist in the world around us, and to become a part of the solution rather than continue to be a part of the problem. Everybody's part of the problem, but all of us can also be part of the solution. And so the more benefit we realize on a personal level with this, the more we can be helpful to other people, whether it's not necessarily by introducing them to ayahuasca, but by opening their eyes and opening their hearts to a better way of living. And the best way to do that is through your own shining example. I'm not a proponent of proselytization of shamanism or the sacred plants. I trust and believe very strongly in their own ability to do the calling. So those who have chosen a path of service in association with that, provide the service, but generally don't do the calling. That's something that's a mystical message that emanates from the spirit of the medicine itself and cuts across all the boundaries. It can reach the farthest corners of the planet, and people are becoming aware of this through means other than the media too. It's not all just media conveyance of this. Some people are just getting an inner call or an inner connection, and they don't have a clue where it's coming from. Then they begin to investigate, and then that sets upon the research path to find out more about it. And I hear from people from all over the world all the time, every day. I hear from people who are just getting this call. The light has gone off.
It's just been incredible. And one of the beautiful gifts I've been given by your ceremonies, Don Howard, is the ability to love myself. The ayahuasca showed me many times that I give so much of my love to others, but not back to myself. Yeah. And one night I was lying in bed, and it was almost like I'd just come out of the ayahuasca ceremony, and I just started hearing this voice saying, "You need to love yourself, you need to love yourself." And it felt as if the ayahuasca had picked me up, like it was picking me up out of bed. So I literally got up out of bed, and I just felt this force guiding me into the bathroom. And it made me look at myself in the mirror. Mm-hmm. And for the first time in my life, I actually looked at myself as another being, as a being that needs love. And it was like I separated into two people, to the person who needs to do the loving and to this being that needs love. Mm-hmm. And I felt so guilty that I had given love to so many people, but not necessarily enough to myself. Yeah. And I looked at these two beings, looked at one another, and one of them said, "I love you." Mm-hmm. And I felt it for the first time, not in my head, but in my heart. I felt love for myself. Mm-hmm. And what a gift that is, and how many of us are out there that we don't show that love toward ourselves. We just give it to others. And it really showed me that if we can all love ourselves and heal ourselves collectively, we'll see dramatic change as a whole. And it all starts with the ability, personal healing starts with the ability to love yourself. And that was just so beautiful. I can't think of anything more magical than that. And I had another experience where the medicine showed me that as part of my self-love, I also need to love my body. And so it had me go through one by one and thank my organs. Because the ayahuasca told me, well, in your 31 years of life, you've never even thanked your body, this amazing machine that has been helping you survive. And so I went and I thanked my heart, and I said, thank you for not stopping beating for 31 years. I appreciate it. Apologized to my lungs for the cigarettes I smoked in college, and, and then thought of an image of my colon and thanked it. And it said, it's a dirty job, but someone's got to do it. And I just have been given such a gift of self-love, and I'm just beaming right now with not only love for the universe, but also love for myself. And another gift I've been given during on your ayahuasca journeys was I was shown an image of the earth, and I was shown mankind on the earth. And at first there were just 2 people, and then 10 people, and then 1,000,000 people, and then 7 billion people. And I saw people just covering the earth, and then I saw it start flashing black and red and black and red. And I saw the wars and the destruction and the fighting. And I felt the pain that Mother Nature's going through right now, and the urgency for transformation. And that was the insight I was given, was we need to collectively dramatically change consciousness as soon as possible, because there's a serious illness going on the planet that we need to heal. And that's something that's given me a lot of drive to move forward in my work to expand consciousness. And it's shown me that healing collectively begins at the individual level. And through these medicines like ayahuasca, we're empowered to do so. So thank you.
It's the only answer for the future,
Yeah.
really. The medicine for the times is consciousness, the growth of consciousness and growth of the collective consciousness. But that really happens one person at a time, even though it's happening simultaneously on countless fronts, even as we speak. So things are in motion, and we're all a part of that. And I think the best way we can pass that through is just to reflect it in our own lives and in the light that we shine for others.
Such a simple concept. Just heal yourself, shine your light, and then you can change the world.
And love, like charity, begins at home. So it's about finding that sense of deep, compassionate love for ourselves, which enables us to extend that to others.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. We're actually sitting at the table where we're about to participate in a Wachuma ceremony, which is another incredible plant medicine. We'll have a podcast in the future to discuss that. Okay. I really look forward to talking about that, because I felt like that has really helped open my heart to accept more self-love and can help many people as well. But for those people listening, how can they get in touch with your work, Don Howard, and connect with you, say they're interested in coming to the center?
Well, we have a website, and the address is www.biopark.org. And people could also send me an email with a personal introduction. And participation in our work is screened for motive, intention, safety considerations. It's not exclusive, but it's selective. And we try to invite the people who have the best potential for benefit from it, and who bring the best intentions to it.
It's been an honor to be in your presence and to learn from you on this journey I've been taking with these medicines, and I can't thank you enough for all the healing and for sharing your knowledge with our audience. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to do it. Thank you very much. Yeah.